Coming up, surprise, surprise, the New York Football Giants win on Sunday against the division rival Washington Commanders. What does it mean for Tyrod Taylor, for Daniel Jones, for the trade deadline, and Saquon Barkley? Obviously, it's a dominant defensive showing once again. Should we now consider the possibility of being in the wild card picture? We dive in coming up next. Yes, sir. You heard it here at the top. The New York Football Giants are winners, and we are OGP, the One Giant Podcast. And that's Andrew Makowitz. I'm Adam Armbrecht, and I don't even know what to do with myself, Andy. The New York Football Giants won a game. You went as far as saying, give me those points. Give me those points at home. I believe the Giants can cover. Yeah, I don't know if you thought they could win that game, but ultimately they did. It's another dominant defensive performance, and we're going to get in on all the nooks and crannies and what this means in the short and long term for Big Blue.
Big win for the Giants, much needed at home, gave the fans something to cheer about. Yeah, I had the game 17-13 was my official prediction for the Giants. Kind of felt like it was in that similar vein, knowing that both teams struggled a little bit to score. But hey, let's not take anything away. The Giants got in the end zone multiple times. The defense looked amazing, which we're going to get into. But overall, it felt complimentary in a lot of ways, but then also the challenges the Giants faced were also complementary across the board.
It's funny, man, because and listen, this is going to be overwhelmingly positive. This episode we have all week to talk about what I think came out as a 36.5 opening over underline against the Jets, among the lowest of the NFL season. When we talk about these, there are games. I think Sunday night's game between the Eagles and the Dolphins, that was something like 50 something and a half over under. One of those teams can outscore the combined totals from a Giants game. Yet, nevertheless, in a game like this, it's funny because the Giants come out, they do some things great offensively, they score offensive touchdowns, and then by the second half, you flip it and you're asking the defense to keep standing on its head, to keep making big plays. So, you wouldn't call it a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, but we're gonna lean into the defensive side because this now marks, to me, two complete games defensively. I didn't count that Dolphins one as being a part of it, but we'll spotlight some of the standout players there. Offensively, touchdowns. Offensively, Jalen Hyatt more and more involved. Big plays, 20-plus yard plays from several players. And at the center of all of it is Tyrod Taylor. Listen, we don't know what 33, 34-year-old Tyrod Taylor is in the NFL landscape, but what we can say is he is a guy that came into this game understanding I can't make mistakes. And that's kind of been the career theme for him. He's a guy that wasn't going to take too many risks, but was also going to avoid making mistakes. And when you go up against a susceptible, as we highlighted, secondary for the Washington Commanders, he did exactly what you needed to do. He put the ball into some key spots, made some big throws when it mattered, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, QBR of 55.8, which is among the best this season for a Giants quarterback. Just where did you stand on him individually? And we'll open it right up there to the conversation about Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I thought that Tyrod Taylor played well. He seemed very poised in the pocket. It felt like his pocket awareness was really strong in this game. There was some pressure from Allen and Chase Young and others, but it felt like he was moving around effectively in the pocket without taking his eyes off of his receivers. Like it felt like he had a really good instincts on when to run. You talked
Mm-hmm.
about his mobility before. It just felt early on in that game. He took the deep shots when he needed to. Tyrod Taylor played very well for the Giants in that situation. The weird thing is, like, they only scored 14 points in this game, though, right?
Of
Like,
course.
we're so excited because of those two drives that look good, but I mean, credit where credit's due. They scored enough points to win the game this time.
And frankly, I mean, I would associate that as being an offensive game calling that didn't quite continue to open things up, right? It felt like the Giants knew what they needed to do, score some points. And then also because the defense has been playing well, felt very willing to kind of bleed the clock, especially in that third quarter. There wasn't a lot of risk taking going on. But I will highlight, as we mentioned there, a good game from Tyrod. You had 20 plus throws that went to Darren Waller for 27, Jalen Hyatt for 42. You had 32 to Saquon Barkley on that touchdown, which was effectively like a 3-yard pass. But hey, guess what? It counts for 32 yards in the stat sheet. A 22-yarder to Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson for 22 as well. So the multitude of deep throws and being able to see it, assess that it's available, and decide to make the throw. The hard part here for me is, and this isn't going negative, but the conversation now is, well, is Tyrod a better quarterback for the Giants right now than Daniel Jones? The obvious things are, well, the offensive line has played better the last couple of weeks. The second half of this game against Washington, they did not play so well. And the more pressure that got on Tyrod was the harder it was to make decisions and make throws and move the football. But I think, to me right now, the baseline I would set is Tyrod has come into this point and shown that he can be a QB that avoids mistakes, sees and makes the throws when available, and can lead a team to wins. The question that gets open-ended for Daniel Jones now is, if you return over any of these next handful of games, which are against potentially bad teams, teams with bad quarterback play, teams with bad defenses, if you come back in these games and do what Tyrod did, and then that little bit more we think you're capable of, then it's all apples to apples. It's all relative. It's all good. If you don't, then it informs it. But I think we need to live in this world where, like, I need the sample sizes to inform how I think about it. And it's impossible to walk away from these last 2 games or even just Sunday and say, this has been a better, more consistent offensive line in front of the QB.
Tyrod Taylor has played exactly how a backup quarterback should play, where it doesn't look like an unmitigated disaster. You feel like there isn't that much upside, but the downside, they're not going to make sure that he takes too many risks. They're going to make sure that they try to just stay in the game competitively, and like that's totally okay, right? That's totally fine. If you
Okay.
want to score 9 and 14 points a game, that is exactly like one of the ways that you could try to do this.
Okay, here's my pushback on that in terms of labeling him a backup, the way we want a backup to play. 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's a starting QB stat line. I don't care who the competition is. And we know that Washington's bad. Fine. The difference here to me is that and what I want to know is the Daniel Jones hesitancy to release, right? Hesitancy to throw downfield. That's the biggest factor here. And that's where, inside of a vacuum of the New York Giants, I would say, who's played more like a starter so far this year? Well, in the game, they only got 2 wins on the scoreboard. Daniel Jones has the second half of the Cardinals game, as good as any quarterback has looked, and Tyrod Taylor has this Washington Commanders game in totality, where he does what you do to need to win. It's unfortunate, but I think too, isn't our clear definition here of these 2 players? Tyrod Taylor gives you a much more consistent floor expectation and certainly a more reasonable ceiling. Daniel Jones has that undefined ceiling, but has shown you that his floor can be the basement. Like he can be that guy because there is more pressure as the 4-year potential franchise guy.
Yeah, let's be clear. Tyrod Taylor did enough for the Giants to win this game. But
Mhm.
Adam, you just mentioned it, and it feels like this is the perception. It's like Daniel Jones had 1 good half against Arizona. Look at what Tyrod Taylor did against the Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
Okay, keep in mind, he had the dump off pass to Saquon Barkley, who ran the ball 32 yards for that touchdown, right? There was about 9 minutes to go in the game, right? 9 minutes to go in the first half.
Yeah, for sure.
From that point on, the Giants went punt, punt, end of half, punt, 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 fumble, end of game.
Yeah.
That is what the offense did.
Okay.
So for us to be able to say, look at this great game that Tyrod Taylor played when they didn't score a singular point for the last 39 minutes of the game, feels like we're shifting the goalposts here a little bit on how we look at these quarterbacks.
Okay, here's the problem is that I agree with you in saying that and bringing it up. But you wouldn't bring that up if Daniel Jones threw the 3-yard pass to Saquon Barkley and it went for a 32-yard touchdown, right? Like, and I'm using you as the Giants fan base. Like, you wouldn't bring this up as a
No, of
part of
course.
Daniel Jones' game. It would be, yeah, made the easy read,
Yeah,
took the
make the
easy
smart
touchdown,
play.
right? Yeah.
But I'm saying give him all the credit for throwing the 2 touchdown passes. That pass to Waller was incredible. But
Yes.
for 39 minutes of the remainder
Yeah.
of the game, we're saying Tyrod Taylor played a great game. They didn't score a singular point. And so my whole thing is this. If you want to try to score 14 points and hope that the defense stands on its head every single game, I actually think Tyrod Taylor gives you a really good chance to do that. Might even do a better job than Daniel Jones. But for this team to go where it needs to go, they need higher end quarterback play from their quarterback. They need someone that can get them 20 points, 24 points. I
Yeah,
mean, the only game that they scored more than 16 points was the game where Daniel Jones played against the Arizona Cardinals. They need the upside of
sure.
quarterback play, not necessarily the floor, at least in my opinion.
So that's what makes it interesting as we move into our next point of this game, which was the defense, right? And the last note there being, so far, I think that Tyrod Taylor, when he's had the time, has thrown perfect passes in perfect places for guys to go make plays. You mentioned Darren Waller, the Jalen Hyatt one, where I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't think he intended to have that first foot dragging. I think he was going to pick that up to plant it, but the timing worked out right. He also made a great play, by the way, on the toss up, which some people were debating. Jalen, let him intercept it. It's a punting play that we're doing here. But when you see how excited Jalen Hyatt was to defend that pass, you don't take it away from him. You say, "Hey, man, you give the safety signal. No catch. I did my job." You can go ahead on that one before we switch.
No, trust me. Listen, he's trying to make a play. You're almost like, well, it would have been better if they
Tyrod's
got
trying to
like
throw the interception. He wants him to
it,
take it off.
it would have pinned him like right around the 5 yard line. I think they got
Yeah,
it at like the 15 or the 16. It would have helped the Giants get about 10 or 12 yards more. But again, we talked about it about Jalen Hyatt specifically. He
yeah,
is a matchup nightmare. You can see him just flying by guys. He almost had that ridiculous one-handed grab in the end zone, which would have been a highlight type of play for this team.
yeah,
You can just see that he needs to be on the field, full stop, end of
yeah.
sentence. Like he has asserted himself to the point where his upside is tremendous, where it's going to lose reps for guys like Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard, even Isaiah Hodgins. Probably not going to see as many reps, knowing Jalen Hyatt is forcing himself to be out there now.
Yeah, by the way, that would have been 3 touchdowns for Tyrod Taylor, right? I mean, let's throw
It
in the
would have.
bag there. The other thing, and the other problem I think coming out for this offense, and I go back to it, I think the play calling still continues to confuse me at times because Wan'Dale Robinson, they finally have figured out ways to manufacture the ball, getting it into his hands. He makes 2 defenders, a safety and a linebacker, because when you get a linebacker on him, you should feel like, hey, this is our chance to go make plays. And then he disappears from the production, disappears from the game plan as well. I mean, both these guys, Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't think it's hard to squint and say, well, here is the future of this team, right? It's just a matter of integrating them fully and feeling confident. I think the offense was very willing to be very conservative in this game. Defensively, I said it there at the top. I don't think that the Dolphins game, 3 turnovers, you can't always depend on those things, but the Giants are turning teams over now. These last 2 weeks against a very good Buffalo team, fantastic job by them there. Had a chance to win it, could not get the job done. This game, even though we knew this was a bad offensive line, to me, it's still always now prove you can go beat up a bad offensive line. And the Giants did that. I mean, there were multiple instances where it was Kayvon Thibodeux and Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence and Bobby Okereke and a young second-year player that we had our concerns early on with in Micah McFadden, who continues to stack really good performances one after another.
Yeah, kudos to Micah McFadden. He seems to be shifting a little bit with Isaiah Simmons, based on whether or not it's a run play or a pass play, knowing that
Yes.
Isaiah Simmons is a little bit more freakish athleticism, in pass coverage. But Micah McFadden was the highest graded linebacker in week 7. Like, you got to give the guy credit when he's been a rotational guy, just working hard, trying to get in there. He played awesome. Bobby Okereke led the team in tackles again. He feels like he really has asserted himself as the dominant factor in the middle of the field. And
Sure.
Adam, we talked about it in our preview show. It was going to be important for the Giants to be able to get pressure up the middle with both Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence. And while PFF grades and things like that didn't really do Leonard Williams the justice I think he deserved, Dexter Lawrence was in the backfield getting pressure up the middle consistently.
Yeah.
It felt like it was a little bit of their offensive line not being great, a little bit of Sam Howell doing Sam
Yeah.
Howell things, holding on to the ball forever, and a lot of the Giants and Wink Martindale getting as much pressure on Sam Howell, making them uncomfortable as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think it's funny when you think about games now. Daniel Jones in his 5th year, so these aren't 1-to-1 comps. But Sam Howell reminded me of Daniel Jones early in this season when, hey, it's been a lot of pressure. You're scrambling for your life a lot, and then when there's a chance to throw it, you're like, Wow. Well, he's about 5 yards short there. Whoops, about 3 yards out of bounds there. So whether it was the pressure or just a young quarterback, he missed opportunities. And then he also, as we said leading into this game, it was like, yeah, he likes to hold on to that ball a little too long. And when you do that, you keep having these parties met there at the middle. On Leonard Williams, obviously, we know had the block field goal, got that big bear paw up there, or big cat paw, we should say, for Leonard. And got that block. I thought he performed very well. Micah McFadden, remember, he's the one that gets the pressure on Sam Howell in the end zone, a near safety that ends up being a gentle lob to Kayvon Thibodeux, who, you want to say, and I said this is what I said when people asked, oh, can't believe he dropped it. I was like, well, he's an edge rusher. He's not even a linebacker. He's not even a cornerback. He's a defensive player, but he's the worst form of defensive player to intercept him. And also, this thing wasn't zipped at him. It wasn't awkwardly bumbling towards him. It was like, hey, I'm throwing the ball to you like it's a little warm-up toss. And Kayvon, he said it after the game. Can I be honest? He said it after the game. He's like, nobody, he threw Sterling Shepard under the bus for like muffing the punt and having a fumble there. It was the weirdest, like, dude, I know I got to make that play. It's all good. Nobody's mad at Sterling, though. And it was like, calm down, buddy. This is like so tongue in cheek for you. You had a
It's
great
so
game. Just take it on the chin, would you?
it yes, and let's just call a spade here, right?
It
Like,
was pathetic.
look, two things can be true with Kayvon Thibodeau. I think he played well defensively, 1.5 sacks, tackle for a loss, four total tackles. Like, he looked great, was on the field for almost virtually every play except the one snap. He
Yeah.
was great for the Giants. He was a pass rushing wrecker, and he played well in that defense. And also, those are the types of situations
Yeah.
that he has to make that play. It's like
Right.
if you force a fumble and you were the only guy within, I don't know, 5 to 7 yards of the ball that's just on the ground, and you decide not to fall on it and you try to pick it up and it gets fumbled and the quarterback recovers it, like, that is a huge mistake and a huge error that we can't just gloss over because you're a defensive player.
Yeah.
Those are the types of mistakes, if we want to get better, if we want to put points on the board, that cannot happen. And that's why I tongue in cheek said before, all three phases had their moments with guys like Leonard
Yeah.
Williams blocking the punt. But then you talk about Eric Gray, what a disaster him being a punt returner is. Clearly, that's the end of that charade. I am more frustrated with Sterling Shepard than I am with Eric Gray, because the did you get the same sense that I did, where like it didn't even seem like Sterling Shepard was trying? Like, the level of effort was was almost an abomination on that kick return. Is it like, did you notice the same thing, or were you thinking he just felt like a fish out of water?
Yeah, very quickly on just on the defensive side here, 12 QB hits, 6 pass deflections, 4 for a loss, 6 sacks on the day. Really great performance from that unit overall. All the credit in the world, including Deonte Banks being put in one-on-one on the island with McLaurin. Yes, he had 6 for 90. That's a great stat line for him, but several instances where Deonte Banks did a wonderful job in coverage. He's clearly developing into, as a young cornerback, someone that's going to be a stalwart for this defense on the outside. The Sterling Shepard piece, man, here I was shocked by the way Brian Dable reacted to his fumble. And maybe you're right. The effort piece, that's interesting. Like, and the way that Brian Dable, he went over, casually talked to him at first, then went back over, put his arm around him, and was having a conversation with him, relative to the way other players have made mistakes throughout the season and throughout last year. It was very atypical, Brian Dable, and it made me wonder one of two things. Has Sterling Shepard maybe just not been a totally healthy guy here this year? And, that's the part of the combination of why he doesn't get some looks or reps. Seems unlikely, because when he's been out there, he's looked good, even if he hasn't been utilized that much. Or this is not remotely a role that I'm supposed to be a part of. We saw him do it a little bit in training camp. They talked about it, but it felt almost like Brian Dable was being apologetic. Like, I'm sorry I put you out there to go do this. Shame on me. While meanwhile, we're watching Jamison Crowder for the Washington Commanders return their kicks and punts, who was on our team. Like, I don't know. It was a very weird little pocket there on special teams.
It was confounding, was what it was to me,
Yeah.
because like Sterling Shepard kind of like went in for it but didn't fully commit, and then the ball ricochets off of him and he just looks, and he didn't even move. He's just like, well, I guess that happened. You saw that he was distraught on the bench, and I think Brian Dable did probably turn to him and say, look, that's our bad. Like, we haven't put you in the right position to succeed. But it was just really strange. And
It was.
what's crazy is Sterling Shepard got 10 snaps on offense in the first quarter, and then after that didn't see the field again. I don't know. It feels like they're moving away from him as they talked about some more of the younger guys. I'd be surprised to see him out there. But what I was talking about before with the 3 different phases, you
Yeah.
have Eric Gray muffing punts.
Yes.
You've
And
got
gets injured as well.
and getting injured. You've got Sterling Shepard fumbling the ball. You've got Graham Gano missing field goals on special
Yep.
teams. Special teams was a little bit of a liability, to say the least. The offense, Saquon Barkley inexplicably fumbled the ball. That's not usually something that he's known for.
Mhm.
He's usually sure-handed. And then you
Only the
have Kayvon
second fumble
Thibodeau
he's ever
with the
lost in his
picks.
career. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have Kayvon Thibodeau with the walk-in pick six that kind of happened the way that it did. Don't want to get too negative, but when you only score 14 points and you feel like you dominated the game, like that's one where like all of a sudden you look up and you lose the game 17-14 in overtime. You're like, we dominated every facet of that game. How did we lose? Those mistakes we just mentioned are the way that the Giants, almost could have had a season-ending situation there.
Yeah, and that's part of it. Remember, I mentioned Deonte Banks before. He had the antithesis of Kayvon Thibodeau's muffed opportunity for an interception. This was a going away from the quarterback, leaping into the air, extended arms, like look like a guy who could run a route for you if you needed him to. And that was on an incredibly underthrown ball by Sam Howell. The defense had a busted coverage there. That wide receiver, if you throw that thing 10 yards out in front of him, he's gone all day. So again, to your point, it's not about being negative here, but I think it does encapsulate, as we put it here, we're going to talk about it, the wild card situation, because, hey, the NFC, the NFL at large, man, you don't know what the heck goes on over in the week of football. You never know what games are going to look like. The Buffalo Bills lost to the Patriots, and maybe that makes it worse that the Giants didn't beat them a week ago. But the fact that this team, when you look at this game, you won the game. And that's all that matters, right? 3 weeks from now, if the Giants continue to win some football games, you won't care how they got there. But when you look back at it, you will remember that this is a game 14-7 that you never closed the team out. You didn't get a field goal to make it 17-7 and make it a 2-score game and have the last 6 minutes be somewhat meaningless. No, it took every single second of every single play all the way down to the wire to keep yourself ahead of a team that we believe now 3-4. But everyone, I think consensus would say they are far closer to the bottom of the pack than they are towards the top. So it was a win, but I don't know if I'm running around puffing my chest over this one just yet. However, the wild card, Andrew. This is why it's interesting. When we go over and look at the NFC picture, it ends right now after you have the 4 division leaders right now, which would be the Eagles, the 49ers, the Lions, the Falcons, and the Seahawks. Then you'd look over at the Cowboys and the Buccaneers in the wild card spots. And we're not here talking about, competing necessarily for one of those. The third wild card, however, because the Rams lost, because we beat the Commanders, the Saints were off, the Vikings did win, and the Packers lost. All of those teams start at 3-4, down to 2-4. And the Giants at 2-5 are right there, as are the Chicago Bears. And mentioning the Chicago Bears, I think, should clarify why you shouldn't be overly hyped about the situation. But they are within an earshot of this, and they will play the Commanders again. They will play the Green Bay Packers head-to-head. So there are, a number of teams here that you are going to see. They play the Rams at the end of the year. You can squint your eyes and say, hey, a lot of opportunities to make headway here. Should anyone buy into that idea, as we know the trade deadline looms, and we know some decisions maybe have already been made inside that building, which I will openly tell you right now is a massive mistake by the Giants, not about doing or not doing, but about shutting down the decision-making process way too soon to be making that call.
Well, last week I said you have to win both games before the trade deadline in order to have any chance. And you were like, "Oh, well, Andy, like Daniel Jones is out there or not, the season is over." And I
Yeah,
gave you a little bit of pushback on that, saying like, "No, it's still alive until they lose the next game. Like
right.
if they continue to build upon what they did, the offensive line's looking a little bit better than it did previously. The defense looks significantly better than when it was giving up 40 and 35 points early on in the season. Listen,
Sure.
this Jets game, they are going to be 3-point underdogs again, just like they were against the Washington Commanders, against the 500 Jets team. If the Giants win that game, then all of a sudden you've got the Raiders, who Lord knows what's going on in Las Vegas. Like
Sure.
I don't know. Hopefully they trot out Brian Hoyer against the Giants again, because that's just a disaster. Listen, and then the Giants play the Cowboys, and then they've got a couple of easy games coming up, or easier games: Commanders, Patriots, Packers, Saints, even, right? So, like, Adam, it's
All teams
not
ahead of them.
out
Yeah.
of the realm of possibility that if this defense plays the way that it has been, and we get a little bit better offensive line play, that this team can be competitive and win games against a bunch of middling 500 other, 500 record teams that are up on the schedule.
They will play 4 out of the 5 teams ahead of them in the wild card pecking order right now. The other team in there being the Vikings. We know what they're dealing with. They've lost players. They may be pushing the sales button here if somebody wants to wow them with offers around them as well. Here's the thing that I'll put in a couple things. One, that, yeah, you can talk whatever smack we want about the Raiders. They're in the exact same position the Giants are in the AFC. Hey, we're only a half a game out of the wild card spot right now, because that's what it is. The Texans are 3-3. The Raiders are 3-4. All these teams fall into this same category. My only concern, I think, right now is this. In the same way that I'll acknowledge that, and I think you would say too, that the way this team performed early in the season, you look and you go, good Lord, like what are we doing? What is this? But outside of that Arizona game, you played the Cowboys. We know that they're a quality team, even if they're not in the upper echelon. The San Francisco 49ers are in the upper echelon. Seattle is a part of that upper echelon, as is Miami. And even Buffalo, they're somewhere there, maybe not the top tier, but they're still obviously a very good team. Okay. So you come out of all those games and you only win one. Maybe we shouldn't look at them and say the Giants are the worst team in the history of football, because all these teams are in playoff conversations, division conversations. Likewise, if we're going to now sit here and do it the other way and go, well, you beat the Commanders and then the Jets and the Raiders and the Commanders again and the Patriots, maybe even the Green Bay Packers, we could get out there and win some of these football games and start to create a new, different narrative. This is where I come back to what I said coming into this game. I think the season is over in the sense of you're not truly, in my opinion, going to be competing for anything of substance. And I would say that if the Giants made the wild card ultimately this season, that would be a success. And you would sign up for that. And it wouldn't matter how you got there. But it's a razor thin margin of missing the last wild card spot and not making the playoffs.
Of
And
course.
then saying, whoops, all of these other little wins. Oh, yeah, it was all really nice, but you sold us a bad bill of goods and you're a 7-10 team. And you would have been far better off making some bigger decisions. I mentioned about the trade deadline, right? Making some smart decisions about this football team. If you hold yourself from making those moves ahead of the deadline because you think this thing is possible, or you're selling the fan base that it's possible, I will be pretty frustrated with the front office if we're talking about a 7-10 team that misses the playoffs and just lets a Dory Jackson walk out the door, lets a Leonard Williams walk out the door. They're not going to, I think they came out and said Saquon Barkley is not going anywhere. I get all the reasons why, but I'm not going to sit here and be convinced that this isn't still a little bit of front office smoke and mirrors about getting people to hold on, baby. Just hold on a little bit longer here.
The tough part is, Adam, if this defense plays the way that it has the last couple of games,
That's the
and
hard
they
part.
are a top 10 defense, you will literally be in every single game for the rest of the year. We know that there are challenges on the offensive side of the ball,
Yes.
but if you're getting interceptions and pressure and limiting teams to 9, 10, 14 points in a game, you will be competitive in all these games. And so for me, that's why the season isn't over yet. There are winnable games against mediocre teams. The Giants may be a mediocre team, or their defense might be top 10. And that's where I kind of hang my hat on this and say, if this defense is what we think it looks like the last couple of weeks, the Giants have a real chance to actually go on a run here and win some games.
The hanging question over top of this is the health of Daniel Jones. And if we think that this is what the offense is destined to be, a team that can score a couple of touchdowns for you, isn't ever really going to be overly dynamic or explosive. And if it's Tyrod Taylor that goes out against the Jets and you win another game, then you will have the conversation. It's going to be really hard. Right, wrong, good line, bad line, etc. It's going to be hard. And Tyrod said it the right way in the postgame. They asked him about it. Do you know this influence if you should be the starter or not? He said, I'm here. I'm just a member of the team. Daniel Jones is excellent. I'm the backup. Like, he said everything the right way. But you know for a fact that Brian Daboll and the Giants, especially if he goes out and has an error-free football game again, you could be looking back after 3 games, a 2-1 record, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, no turnovers, and games that are won because the defense is battling in there. You're going to look at Daniel Jones and say, if you walk out there and you fumble it, you throw a pick, that's going to be the end for us, because we're not good enough to do it any other way, right? And I think that's the razor thin margin for success for Daniel Jones in this season, which is very interesting just to watch it unfold here.
At the end of the day,
At the end
Adam,
of the day, at the end of the day.
only us Giant fans would take a win and then use it as a lightning rod controversy as to whether the season's over, which quarterback should start, how all of that happens. Like it's just it's maddening to think that that's the case. I know that we talked about Tyrod Taylor being a backup. We pointed out some of the challenges in the second half. I am excited that Tyrod Taylor is on this team. He got the Giants
Yes.
a much needed win to keep the season afloat. We can have that discussion later on about like who should start, how it should go, but none of that matters if the Giants don't continue to win football games. So by any means necessary, however they can do it, and I'm suspecting that it's going to be with a top 10 defensive effort, the Giants just got to keep winning games that are winnable on the schedule.
Get us after us over on YouTube with your feelings about Tyrod Taylor. Over on social media at One Giant Podcast on Twitter at AndyMac214 at Adam Armbrecht. And this week, guess what? There's another little Tyrod narrative here. What if he plays well and teams come a calling because they need a quarterback to stave off while they wait for something? There's a world where Tyrod Taylor's trade value is really on the rise here ahead of that deadline as well. The Giants will never trade him, or maybe they will. You got to tune in to find out how Andy feels about that one. Until next time, guys, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know after a win.
As always, let's go Big Blue.